A U.S. fighter jet just fired on an Iranian oil tanker. Welcome to This Explainer. Right now, we are literally witnessing a massive, fast-moving geopolitical shift unfold in the Middle East, one that could alter international trade and global security forever. So let's map out exactly what is happening.
U.S. forces didn't just fire a warning shot over the bow. They literally took out the ship's rudder, right there in the Gulf of Oman. I mean, this is not a drill, folks. It's a massive military escalation, and it demands our attention right now.
Okay, let's dive into this. Section 1. Firing on the tanker. According to Suncom, here's what went down. You had this tanker heading straight for an Iranian port, directly violating an active U.S. blockade. American forces issued multiple, crystal-clear warnings, but the crew completely ignored them. So U.S. forces had to step in with a physical military intervention. They fired on the ship, mechanically disabled the rudder, and basically stopped it dead in the water. That means the U.S. blockade is officially, physically in effect. And this action on the water is being backed up by some incredibly stark rhetoric from the very top. Now, President Trump has actually expressed some cautious optimism about recent talks. But, as this quote makes absolutely clear, diplomacy comes with a severe ultimatum attached. The U.S. is totally prepared to take things a massive step further if a deal isn't reached.
Now, what's really interesting about this next part is how it alters the map. Section 2. Reorienting global trade routes. Notice how a localized military blockade literally redraws the physical map of global trade. Because traditional maritime container ships are completely blocked from ocean ports, Iran has been forced into a massive logistical pivot. They're essentially having to abandon the open ocean. So to keep their economy moving, they are reorienting entirely toward overland paths, rail networks, and the Caspian Sea. And as a geopolitical analyst will tell you, this kind of geographic disruption is absolutely not an accident. It is a highly intentional strategy. The blockade is designed to act as maximum economic leverage. The goal here is to take a chaotic regime and basically squeeze them into a corner where they have no choice but to engage in a good faith diplomatic effort. By choking off that traditional maritime economy, the U.S. is trying to force the Iranian leadership directly to the negotiating table.
So, the crucial point is, what does an off-ramp actually look like? Section 3, the 30-day diplomatic framework.
According to a circulating memo reported by Axios and the Wall Street Journal, there's a proposed 30-day negotiation period in Islamabad that hinges on 3 really monumental steps. First, opening the Strait of Hormuz to all traffic. Second, strictly limiting Iran's highly enriched uranium. And third, lifting U.S. sanctions. If these conditions are actually met, well, this current epic fury could finally come to an end.
But here is where the pressure really builds. Even though it's technically a 30-day framework, Pakistani negotiators are reportedly hoping to wrap up these immediate provisions in just 7 days. 7 days! I mean, that perfectly highlights the extreme breakneck urgency of the situation. The window to prevent further military escalation is just incredibly narrow right now.
Let's move on and see how this builds. Section 4, the geopolitical leverage battle. And this brilliantly illustrates the sheer scale of the problem. Based on reporting from the Institute for the Study of War, there is just a fundamental disconnect between the two powers. The U.S. absolutely demands an open strait, the complete removal of highly enriched uranium, and an end to the military conflict. Iran, on the flip side, wants total sovereignty over the strait, long-term economic relief, and to keep building its ballistic missile program. Obviously, these are entirely competing realities.
Because of that stark contrast, foreign policy experts point out that major U.S. concessions are honestly pretty unlikely. The U.S. currently holds a massive military upper hand, which is incredibly obvious given the active physical blockade. So it's really difficult to imagine the current U.S. administration giving Iran leverage over the Strait of Hormuz or, accepting a deal with a 12 to 15-year sunset clause on their nuclear program. When you hold the absolute upper hand in leverage, you generally don't concede your biggest bargaining chips.
So, what does this all mean for us? Section 5, real-world impact. Now, you might be wondering, why does a disabled rudder all the way out in the Gulf of Oman actually matter to you and me? Well, it all comes down to downstream effects. Keeping the Strait of Hormuz open is absolutely critical for the physical security of global shipping. A massive percentage of the world's energy flows through that one specific geographic choke point. If it closes down, international oil markets are immediately threatened, and global supply chains just freeze. This is literally about the fundamental flow of global commerce. And just to make this geopolitical web even more complex, we have to talk about the China factor. President Trump is actually scheduled to visit China next month. Why is that a big deal right now? because China heavily relies on the exact same Iranian oil that's currently being disrupted by this blockade. So, this standoff isn't just an isolated incident between the US and Iran. It directly impacts the energy security of one of the largest economies on Earth, right before a major diplomatic visit.
Which brings us to the ultimate question we really have to ask ourselves as we watch this historic event unfold. As these supply chains are completely reoriented and tankers are literally stopped dead in the water, can temporary military leverage actually secure long-term stability for the world's most critical shipping lanes? Or does it merely hit pause on an inevitable conflict? It's a question that will absolutely define the future of global trade. Thanks so much for watching this explainer, and definitely keep your eyes on the street.